at least until the point of your PhD, you are the expert in the field. And you should know that, and you should feel comfortable and confident because of that. Hello, welcome back. Today we have the video that you asked for about the preparation you need to do for a PhD. First of all, let me say congratulations, you've reached at that stage, meaning that you've submitted the PhD, the supervisor was happy about it, and it's been already some time that the examiner or examiners are reading your thesis. So well done so far. Now, a PhD VIVA is a significant milestone in your PhD education, because that is when you will have actually to not only talk about your PhD, but to defend it, because the examiner may want to challenge you, and it is normal to feel nervous. This video will be split in 4 different categories. One is what you need to do before you actually go to the VIVA. The second one is the general questions that you will get during the VIVA. The third one is some specific questions that you may get during the VIVA. Of course, I'm not going to talk about the technical stuff, but specific questions, the way that they are asked for pretty much every PhD. And the fourth one, which is some little tricks that you can use in order to lead the discussion, avoid some obstacles if you see there is a dead end going somewhere else, and to better handle and manage that VIVA. So let's start with the first part. I would strongly recommend that you first of all read the requirements of the university for the PhD VIVA or defense, whatever they call it. Is often when students are missing little things that they need to prepare for that examination, so make sure that you've read them. Usually they're pretty much the same. Now, you need to allocate about 10 days or say a week before the actual VIVA to prepare for the VIVA. Regardless if it's been a month that you submitted your thesis, which is very unlikely, or it's been 3 or 4 or 6 months that you submitted the thesis, will be good to give it some time again, read it again. It's actually a nice one because now you are looking at it with a different eye. You've been out of the PhD for some time and now you're coming back. So you should be able to spend some good time on reading the whole thesis. So you should know the thesis inside out, every little thing that you have written and the way you've written it. And it is important at that stage to take some notes, and if you find that something was not written well, just to clarify that for your own peace of mind. You need to make sure that you know if you have any deficiencies in your thesis, you know things that they may not be represented very well, or maybe a graph that had some mistakes, or maybe a table that is misplaced. So take all these notes. Now, I'm making a parenthesis here. In some universities, they allow the PhD student to come with these notes and hand them over to the examiners at the beginning of the PhD. It doesn't necessarily mean that the examiner will evaluate those, but at least having them, it shows that you have done your homework, you've prepared for that examination. And secondly, it shows that you have identified the mistakes. You may be a little bit rushed in order to submit the thesis, but then you gave it another read and then you had more time reading through and you've spent time in correcting it. So these little mistakes, maybe they also concur with the mistakes that the actual examiners have, and there will be things that you'll be changing after the VIVA, because in most cases, even if you are a successful PhD and you get awarded the PhD that very same day, you will still be required to make some changes. So some of the changes can be the ones that you just proposed yourself. Now, the next big thing is whether you actually know who the examiner or the examiners are. I'm sure that you all know that in different countries, the examination style of a PhD is different. So for instance, here in the UK, we have a closed examination in a room, is usually the students, maybe a chair of the whole event, and then there is one examiner which is from the university and one external examiner, and that examiner is taking the lead, the external examiner. And if the student asks and the supervisor also wants, he or she can join the Viva. But it's not always happening, it's 50-50 times, I would say. In other universities, in Europe for instance, in most universities is a public defense, so it is in a proper lecture theatre where other PhD students, postdocs, friends, family, they attend, and then in front you have usually one examiner opposite the PhD student, and they have that sort of long interview, and then you have another panel of people also making some questions and asking for clarifications at the end. If that is your university is doing this kind of examination, I would strongly recommend from the previous years, before you actually reach at the point that you will do your own Viva, go and attend a few. Not only you will get more information about how the whole thing is conducted, but you will also feel much less anxious when your examination will come, because you will feel more comfortable in that environment. So let's assume that you know who the supervisor will be. So in that case, the first thing I would do is just to go and search about the supervisor, see what is his or her background. Is it a person who's working on numerical studies or experimental? Is it very close to your thing or something else? Because if someone is coming up from a different perspective, from a different angle, they've had a different experience, maybe the style of the questions and the context of the questions will also be different. So I would like to know where the examiner is coming from. For example, in my case, when I did my Viva, my examiner was a super successful academic. He had loads of publications. We're talking about something like 600 journal publications, and he was primarily a computational person. So in my PhD thesis, I had both computational as well as experimental work. But because I knew that the external examiner is a computational guy, before my examination, I studied a lot about the computation. I just wanted to make sure that whatever I've done is right. And if I had any mistakes, if I've done any assumptions, I wanted to highlight these during the Viva. So you should do the same. Next thing I would say is that you are the expert. At least until the point of your PhD, you are the expert in the field. And you should know that, and you should feel comfortable and confident because of that. So nobody can actually challenge you as much as you believe they can, because you actually know the topic. You're getting the PhD for that particular topic. Unless you've missed big things and there are still blurry stuff that you haven't understood well. In that case, I would strongly recommend that you speak with your supervisor and make sure to gain some knowledge and clarify these. But to begin with, that should not be the case. So, because you are the expert, nothing can go that wrong. Depending on when you actually submitted your PhD, maybe 3 months or 6 months ago, maybe more research has come out. And I strongly recommend that you search online for further papers that have been published recently. You want to know whether you've missed something that has been developed very lately, and you want to make sure that you know it. So in case the examiner asks for something else that they've just searched online and they found it, you already know that and you can give some information about it. It shows that you're actually on top of everything that you're doing and you're leading that area. You're not just the expert, but you are one of the people that are driving the research in that area. Now let's move to the second part, which is related to the questions. So you need to do a lot of preparation on the type of the questions that you will get, what sort of answers you will give. You don't have to memorize anything, but you have to be able to structure in a very nice and clear manner your answers. And I would strongly recommend that you don't only do that by reading out or writing some answers, but in fact you are actually speaking out the answers. And if you can do that to a friend of yours or maybe a small audience, it will be even better, because then you have the little time to think and actually make a good sentence completely overall without mistakes, rather than writing something and then take time to delete it and then write it again. To begin with, you may be asked to give a summary. In some universities, they ask for a small presentation, 5 to 10 minutes. In some others, just say a verbal summary of what you've done, 2 to 3 minutes. Make sure that you practice that summary many times and is spot on. It's similar to having a sales pitch and you're trying to promote a product. So you should make a few rehearsals and be very clear about giving what is the problem, what is your methodology, what you have done actually, and what was the significant conclusion of that. In most cases, that summary will then lead to the beginning of the discussion. So again, you should think about what you should say in that summary. The next most common question that comes is, what is your research hypothesis? So what was the problem to begin with? What was the research question that you needed to address? So there is no reason to go through a very extensive historic information about literature review and whatever you found and whatever you've done and that led you to that particular point. You need to clearly say what is the problem that you're tackling. And the next question you may be asked most probably is, what is the impact of the work that you have done? And that is a difficult question. Even if you are an academic and you've been working for 10, 15, 20 years in academia, responding the question about impact is difficult because it means that you have done something that has a practical meaning to someone outside the academia. So your work has led to a development that has happened. Maybe it's a clinical work, maybe is in the industry, maybe it's in practice, something that has changed because of your work, and maybe it's too early. But you can always say, what is the projected, the anticipated impact of your work, or the work that will be done after your PhD. So again, this is a bit beyond the PhD, is more general stuff, but it gives the examiner the understanding that you get the big picture and you know where things are going and you're contributing towards that. You're not just a student who did a thesis, but you are a researcher who understands the whole field and you're trying to push the boundaries of the science or engineering or whatever it is in your field. Now let's move on to the specific questions, the third part. Here things are somewhat easier because the examiner usually, it's got a lot of post-its or notes on your thesis, nowadays electronically as well, and it goes page by page, sometimes line by line. It may last for, in some cases, PhD Vivas last 6-7 hours, in some cases not, only 2-3 hours. So these notes that we said before, if you had them ready, maybe that will also help that part of the process. Of course, some of the details will be related to the methodology, why you've done that sort of analysis, why you've done that sort of test. It will be related to the way that you've presented things and whether they make sense. You will be asked questions about the papers that you've published and which one was the easiest, the most difficult, which part was difficult. So all sorts of questions, technical and a bit less technical, but very well connected, they may be asked at that point. So again, reading again and again your thesis is the only thing that you can do, right? One particular thing that a lot of students are missing is the papers that they have cited. I know that in a PhD thesis you may have cited hundreds of papers and you should not be able to know all of them and what each one did. However, there are some papers that you have used a lot in the thesis. You've cited them many times. They're these core papers that you've used to develop your thesis and take it to another level. So those papers, you should know them very well. Beyond those papers that you cited, I would strongly recommend that you also read some review papers that they have come lately, maybe during your PhD or after your PhD, and they talk about the big picture, all the work that has been done, what the main challenges and opportunities are. Now, there is one thing that we need to clarify. If you have published work out of your PhD, which most probably, ideally, you have done, then you get a big thumbs up, because a lot of questions will not be asked since you have published the journal paper, which means that you've gone through a peer review and these questions have been answered. So I would strongly recommend to go back to the reviews that you got for these papers, the responses to the reviews, the rebuttals that you had, and read them again. Maybe you will get very similar questions to those. So here is a way to find some questions that you'll be asked. And as I said, in most cases, if you have published some papers, they will not really ask you so many technical questions. They will ask you more about the general questions and how your work relates to someone else's work, and where do you see your work going, and what is the innovation in your work as opposed to others. In other words, you should know your contributions. You should be able to explain the contributions of your work in the research community in a very technical and non-technical terms, how your work builds on existing studies, the potential impact of your work, and how your work can then be expanded by yourself or other researchers. Now, let's go to the fourth part, which maybe is the most interesting of all, because here is where you will get a few tips about what you should be doing during that PhD VIVA. So what if you get a question that you don't know how to answer? It's okay. You're not expected to know everything. Of course, if it's something very fundamental, basic about the work and the area that you're in, then you should know it, you are expected to know it. But even if you don't know something, do not try to make up an answer. Believe me, the examiners are very clever people, they know the field very well, they know several fields, they have been numerous times in these examinations, so don't try to fool anyone. You can say that I don't know the answer of that particular thing, so be specific. And then you can easily say that I'm guessing. In other words, you're saying that now I'm using my intuition to come up with an answer that will help the discussion to move on. So one thing that I like doing in those circumstances is that you sit back, you relax, you take a deep breath, you take a few seconds to process the information about the question, and then you give an answer. So those 5, 6, 7 seconds of silence are absolutely fine. Nobody will tell you anything, but they will give you enough time to structure an answer to a question that you never expected, because you don't know about that, right? Now, the other thing that you can do, and it is pretty much allowed to do it, is to say that I haven't thought about that thing, and it's something that it sounds very interesting, and I will give it a lot of consideration in the future. So this is a kind of a diplomatic answer to avoid speaking any further about that particular part of that question, that field, because you know that you're going towards areas that you have no clue about. So before you actually reach to that, you're saying that, yeah, this is something that I haven't looked at, I haven't considered in my thesis, but I will give it a lot of consideration in the future. In that way, you show that you respect the question, it's interesting indeed, but it's beyond what I've done here. In this way, you will lead the discussion. It is important to make sure that at all times you lead the discussion to where you feel comfortable with, and there is no much distraction. The examiners are not taking you to different areas. Of course, this is something that you should also think about when you write the thesis. And this is where it comes a lot of times as supervisors, that we say, do not write things that they may open up new questions, new areas that you haven't really touched upon. Write only the things that you know very well. So quality versus quantity. It's not important to put so much information in, and so that you have also known about that thing, and you've known about that thing, and you have also looked at that thing, if you haven't really gone all the way. And if the question begins because that thing that you lightly touched most probably is unfinished, so a lot of question marks, so the examiners will come back with questions and you wouldn't know how to answer. Instead of that, work in the things that you know very well and focus on that and protect your work. So that thing which part of the thesis will also lead you to have a very good viva or defense. Lastly, I would say that I know that everybody is a bit nervous. You should also think that even the examiners, even experienced examiners, are a bit nervous. So maybe that will help you get slightly more relaxed. Definitely, if you are too nervous, you're not gonna perform very well. So relax, get plenty of rest the day or the days before. Make sure that you sleep really well, you feel energized, you feel strong, clear mind. Don't try to read too much the last day. You will not gonna learn anything about the PhD the last day. You've had years and years working for that. Nevertheless, if you feel that the examination is a bit stressing and you're not really performing as you would like, then you're totally entitled to ask for a break. You can go for 5-10 minutes break, relax, have a bit of water, and then come back and continue. And finally, as I've also mentioned in my short video, there are 3 things that you need. First of all is to be there, to be present. So your brain, you need to be open to the questions, to think about what they're asking you. Make sure that you dress appropriately. Ideally, a smart dressing is good. You don't need to overdo it. You want to be relaxed. Like I will say, for instance, guys, if you don't like wearing a tie and if the tie makes you feel like that you're squeezed, don't wear a tie, okay? Feel relaxed, put your nice and professional dressing, but make sure that you're calm, you feel like you're in a nice environment. Do not eat too much before the viva. Eat something light, maybe also something that will give you a bit of energy. If practicing some yoga or any other meditation, again, helps you relaxing, do that before the viva. Anything that makes you being present and relaxed is a must. And finally, remember that viva is an opportunity that you have to showcase to the examiners what you have done. These examiners will be your future colleagues, your future collaborators in research grants. And what you want to show is that you have excelled, you have done something very good, and you want to promote it. You're not expecting much from them. They're not gonna fund your research. You don't have to be stressed. They want to discuss what you've done. It's just a rather long interview, and being well prepared and confident about your work, I'm sure that you will succeed. Like always, if you like the content of the video, if it is useful for you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for other students also to see it. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to share your personal experiences, you can write them down below. With that said, bye bye until next time.